Well, thank you for that intro. Yes, and welcome to Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott, and great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. And we're looking forward to this show and great to have you with us, whoever you are, wherever you are, or however you're watching. So we record this and it goes out as live, and it's good that you're able to join us. Thank you very much. So the show will be about 50 minutes long, and we always have a guest. And our guest this week is Tony Brown. More about Tony, very interesting stories he's got from Brussels and Farage and the European Union. And we also have the stories behind the news, not just what's on the front page, which is what you get at 10:30 on Sky News, for example, just the front pages. Well, we go behind the front pages and we come up with the serious and sometimes the slightly more amusing or light-hearted stories that are behind the news as well. We also, towards the end of the show, we will have an absolute cracker of a story that may make you laugh, may make you cry, but it's quite amusing, but also quite worrying. We'll have that towards the end of the show. And we put the values of the show into the introduction. And so such things as free speech, strong defences and a smaller state, all that sort of good stuff. But enough from me. And let's bring in studio, if we can bring in our guest for today, Tony Brown.
Hello.
Tony, great to see you again. Good to see you. Now, just a quick intro for Tony. Tony edits the Freedom Association's magazine, Free Nation, for which many thanks. And he was also a former Conservative parliamentary candidate. So I'm sure we can talk a little bit about the Conservatives and what they're up to or what they're not up to, Tony. And also, Tony was a Brussels staffer. And that's something that we want to hear a little bit more about. And you got to know Nigel, and you do know Nigel Farage very well, Tony. So welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
So now you've written about your time in Brussels. So before we look at some of the stuff behind the news, why don't you tell us just a little bit about what you were doing in Brussels and who it was for? And of course, any juicy gossip would be very welcome, Tony.
Well, I'm afraid you may be disappointed on the gossip front because most of what I have to say about the people I worked with in Brussels is extremely complimentary. And obviously, I want to kick off with Nigel. My technical title was, I had a French title, I was a fonctionnaire politique, which actually meant that I was a staffer within the group that Nigel ran. It was called the EFD, the Europe of Freedom and Democracy. Now, I covered various portfolios, including agriculture, fisheries, international trade. I also did something on the economy. But Nigel used to, he was a joy to work for, actually. At least I found him so. He was quite informal. He would sort of wander into my office any time of day and say, "Hey, Tony, I'd welcome your thoughts on this." And he didn't want long papers on anything with citations and references. He wasn't interested in that at all. What he would do would be to come in, present me with a problem. What do you think of the European asylum system? And I would then we'd have a discussion about it. And during the course of the discussion, he'd make a few notes. And then perhaps 48 hours later in the parliament, I would listen to him and I'd think, I suggested that.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. Okay. And how long were you in Brussels for, Tony?
Oh, I was in 10 years, two complete parliamentary terms. I went there in early 2010 after the 2009 European elections, which gave the group the money to take on more staff. And I then stayed until the day we left. In fact, I stayed a couple of months past the day we left for contractual reasons.
So did you stay for the Brexit Party MEPs as well?
Not only did I stay, I advised them as well. During my time in the Parliament, they, although you were asked at different times to sort of pick up anything, you had briefs. And I had the agricultural brief for UKIP, for the Brexit Party. I had the agricultural brief from the day I arrived till the day we left. And that was over 10 years. I also did fisheries most of the time, but I also did international trade, which in many ways was the most challenging of them.
Yeah, I mean, there was some, I mean, during those years, I mean, there was some real, I mean, quite apart from Nigel, who we'll come back to in a minute. I mean, there were some real characters in those various groupings, weren't there?
Oh, I mean, it was a joy of a place to work. I mean, on the day I arrived, when I was sort of doing my official induction by somebody who was an administrative staffer and totally unconnected with the group, she sort of said to me, so let me get this straight. You've come here to work in the Parliament, to be paid by the Parliament in order to attack the Parliament and get your country out of the European Union. I have got this right, haven't I? She said. And I said, yeah, you have got it right. And then she sort of looked at me coldly and said, do you consider that honourable behaviour? And I said, absolutely I do. In fact, I'd go further. You need me because the real problem with the European Union is you aren't a functioning democracy. You haven't really got an opposition. And I've come here to provide some opposition. And you need that to be credible.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Were you, when we voted to leave, June the 23rd, 2016, bliss was it in that morning to be alive, but to be a Brexiteer was very heaven.
Indeed.
I mean, were you in Brussels at the time, and if or how soon after? If not, how soon after? What was the reaction and the mood there?
Right, my job was continuous, but for the 3 weeks or so running up to the election, I in fact took time off in order to go and try and get people to vote Brexit back in the UK. I did this with Tim Aker in his patch in Essex.
Great guy, yeah.
And I spent the election or the referendum results show evening with Tim and his team in their office in Thurrock, watching the results come through. And I have to say that when Newcastle was added to Sunderland, we all looked at one another and sort of said, this could be going our way.
Well, I remember that evening very well, Tony. I left home to go to the Leave party in wherever it was, Millbank Tower or something. And as I left, I said to Penny, I said, I think we're going to lose 52-48. But when Sunderland, I remember, Remain 50,000, Leave 80,000. And it was like, oh my goodness, I think we might be on here. But no, I mean, so when you got back to Brussels, I mean, were you greeted in a friendly manner or a less friendly manner?
It varied considerably, individual by individual and group by group. There were people. The first thing I perhaps should say is that in order to be in a group, you have to have representatives from 7 countries. So we were allied with Italians, with Czechs, with Poles, and so on. And in fact, I worked with these people, and I became the advisor to the Czechs within our group because they were sort of short on resources and expertise. And although I don't speak Czech, in every other respect, my detailed knowledge of Central European and Czech history was a perfect fit for them. So I worked with the Czech MEPs and as a result went to Prague and visited the Czech Parliament and saw the original of the Munich Agreement.
Oh, wow. From the Munich Agreement from 1938.
Correct. There are
Wow.
only, I think, about 3 originals, and
Yeah.
one of them is in the Czech Parliament. And it was very revealing. And here's something that nobody will know. It was just typed up. It was typed up on the spot. It wasn't sort of pre-agreed. And then you have Adolf Hitler's signature. As you'd expect, central, quite large, and then down to the right, also quite large, you have the signal of Neville Chamberlain, who signed it as British Prime Minister. And then, and this is the fascinating revelation of seeing the original, down in tiny writing in the left-hand corner, about as small as you can make it whilst actually signing something, was the signature of the French signatory, Daladier. And I turned to the guys turned to Jiří Payne, who was the Czech MEP, and I said, do you know, that tells me that Daladier knew the consequences of what he was signing for Czechoslovakia and was deeply, deeply ashamed of what he was about to do. And my conclusion is that Daladier was far more switched on about what was going to happen than Neville Chamberlain was, and Daladier would never have flown back to Paris and been daft enough to say, I have a piece of paper in my hand which means peace in our time, when it actually meant absolutely the opposite by giving Hitler everything he wanted.
An interesting comment, Tony. I mean, this was partly to do with Czechoslovakia, wasn't it? And what did Chamberlain infamously call it? A faraway country of which we know nothing.
Correct.
And
one of the tasks I had in the, I should perhaps explain, I have degrees in history from Cambridge University, and I'm a historical devotee. I continue to read history books to this day. What part of the reason I was employed was that when, obscure Central European issues came up, why is Viktor Orban of Hungary so uniquely nationalistic and such an outsider? Now, I could answer that question because I knew enough about the history of Hungary over the last 500 years to explain why Orban had a different perspective from almost everybody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, we visited Budapest last year, and their parliament is magnificent. Talking of the Czech parliament, and I also visited. You could also see shoes by the Danube, which is where they took Jews to line them up and shoot them, and they fell in the river. And they've got these sort of metal shoes. But I also, Tony, I visited the Museum of Communist Terror. Which commemorates the 1956 uprising in which about 3,000 people were killed. But look, let's move on. And I appreciate your grasp of history. There were some big names apart from Nigel. I'm thinking William Dartmouth, the infamous, the wonderful Godfrey Bloom, David Campbell Bannerman, who's chairman of the Freedom Association, which I run, Paul Nuttall, Bill Etheridge. Guys like this. I mean, there was some real characters. I think
all of whom, everybody you've mentioned and many more, I know well, count as friends, still have them in my mobile phone, and talk to them regularly. I have spoken to Paul and David within the last 2 or 3 weeks. I knew William Dartmouth, who's now effectively retired, very well. We formed a team. And one of the amusing things is when you're outsiders, when you are sort of more or less condemned by everybody, you develop a camaraderie and a spirit of it's almost Henry V, isn't it? We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. And Nigel was very good at using this psychologically, and so we were insulted insulted by successive Conservative leaders. We were called gadflies and cranks, clowns and closet racists by Michael Howard and David Cameron. So we had an informal dining club called the Gadfly Club, and it met every Strasbourg, and we all went out to a jolly good dinner, which I might add we paid for. It wasn't on expenses. But Nigel was terribly clubbable, and that made him really good to work for. His, reputation for swilling claret and all the rest of it is well deserved. It makes him bloody good fun. But the great thing about Nigel, and I have the utmost respect for him in this, he could turn up 7:30 or 8 o'clock the following morning, looking absolutely tickety-boo, no sign of a hangover or anything at all. He was a phenomenon, really, and he applied the sort of Sandhurst model. It didn't matter what you got to the night before, provided you were on parade, ready to serve, looking flawless the following morning.
Well, that rings a bell, Tony, with my days there. But no, I witnessed Nigel. I think it was it the 2014 European elections when I was his election agent, and we the count was at Southampton, and we ended up in this hotel on the outskirts of Southampton, drinking. Although I stayed off, I just had one drink. But Nigel was, as you know. In fully enjoying the evening's refreshments, and why not? Because we'd just done really well, and so we all sort of went to bed about 3 o'clock, and I just drove straight home. It was only about an hour's drive, and I'd only had one drink. Well, I got home and collapsed into bed. Nigel was up at 7:30, looking bright as a new pin, and he was doing interviews in the grounds of the hotel. I didn't get up till about lunchtime. I mean, you've got to admire, fair play to the bloke.
That's Nigel all over. In fact, I can tell you what he was doing a couple of months after that, because to the moment, 100 years later, I went on a battlefield tour with him in August 2014, and we went to the Mons Canal, and we were in the exact location 100 years to the minute later, where the first elements of the British Expeditionary Force first saw in front of them a German corps and looked at these guys, of which there were thousands, and the British were fantastically outnumbered. And that battlefield tour with Nigel was one of the best holidays I've ever been on. And, it combined our mutual interest and knowledge of history with, and particularly military history, with the ability to sink a bottle or two. Great fun it was.
Very, very good, Tony. We should move on in a minute, but a couple of final questions on this. I mean, did being in Brussels, did it make you more Eurosceptic, or with all the jollies that you can get over there? Were you ever tempted to go native?
I was never tempted to go native, but I drew this clear distinction. I was opposed to the European Union, but actually I'm a lover of European culture. So, French cheese, French fine wines, a bottle of Chateau Margaux, that kind of thing. No, I regard that as totally separate from the European Union, which is a dominant political organization. So I'm of the persuasion, and there were quite a few of us who at one and the same time opposed the EU but loved all that European culture has to offer.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, my one regret about Brexit, I suppose, is that we weren't given a Europe we could have stayed in. I mean, for me, a Europe of free trade and friendship would have been fine.
I want to say something at this point.
Sure.
David Cameron is, in my view, one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had. And the reason I put it like that is that he had no realistic understanding of the EU himself. So we knew when he went and claimed that he wanted to renegotiate a renegotiation, that there was nothing that the EU could offer which would be enough for the British people. And what I mean by that is that all the arrangements were built into detailed structures and regulations, and they couldn't just turn around and give him what he wanted. He was totally unrealistic. And then worse, if you remember, he refused to allow any work to be done on what happened if the result went our way. And we raised this in advance after the referendum had been called, but before it taking place. Nigel and others said, but David, what happens if our side win? And he refused to countenance it. And as a result, no work had been done at all. And almost all the problems that resulted in terms of our future relationship lay at David Cameron's door because he wouldn't allow any work to be done on it. And that was grossly irresponsible.
Fair points there, Tony. I mean, I think to be fair to Brussels for a minute, there was always going to be a limit to what they could offer us. And because they had to get every member to agree to it. They had to get every member to agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I was in Brussels, I never attacked the EU for doing its job properly. They were shrewd negotiators who understood the detail and the legal agreements. And you can't blame people for doing their job properly. And when they ran rings around the British, my attitude was, well, you know, it shows how incompetent we are, not that they are being unfair, because they weren't. They were just doing what they were paid to do.
No, they had their own corner to represent. And also, you're quite right. We must move on. But you're quite right, Tony. I mean, the morning after the referendum, we had no prime minister and no plan.
Absolutely. And just, I know you want to move on. Last comment. The worst thing Cameron did was, when asked what happens if the Leavers win, he said, it will be my duty to stay on as Prime Minister. Within, what was it, 2 hours of the result being known?
Yes.
He'd gone.
Yes.
I mean, talking about not being a man of your word.
Well, I seem to remember that the hapless Chris Grayling was in the TV studio being asked, should David Cameron stay on? Oh, of course he should stay on. Oh, just a minute. We now go live to number 10 Downing Street. And out comes Cameron to announce he's throwing in the towel. But anyway, let's thank you, Tony. That's a really good, a really interesting summary of Brussels and your time there. But we've got a few things that we can, current news themes and issues that we could talk about. So if the studio could put the first one up. Let's talk about that. We've got about 25 minutes left. So if we could get just wait a minute while the studio puts the first article up. Here we go. Shoplifting. This is from the Telegraph. We've got, let's rattle through these. We've got one from each of 5 papers. So this is from the Telegraph. Shoplifting should be relabeled shop theft. So peers are calling for a change to the outdated term to avoid trivializing a crime that has doubled in 2 decades. Tony, what do you think? I mean, are you seeing this?
I mean, they're right. Shoplifting is not taken seriously, and the supermarkets themselves, the chains, will not do anything about it. Actually, the people I tend to blame are the supermarkets and the justice system and the police, who, hand in glove, work in a way which means that people know they can get away with it. And so they do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you who I feel really sorry for. It's, the big supermarket. I mean, it shouldn't be happening, of course. But the big supermarket chains have got, big resources, although their security staff are told not to tackle anybody. I go into the local Tesco's or even the Waitrose if I'm feeling flush that week, and there's a sort of a guy standing at the door trying to look very official, but he's not allowed. He's told not to tackle anybody. But I feel really sorry for the small independent shopkeeper, many of whom are of Indian or Bangladeshi or Pakistani heritage. I mean, for them, this shoplifting, I mean, they are personally on the hook.
If I was one of those people, I think I'd put up a sign in my window saying, if you must shoplift, please shoplift from a big supermarket chain. They can afford it. I can't.
Yes. But would you also be calling the shoplifters scumbags, Tony? This isn't allowed now.
Yeah, I mean, the police in our country do not seem to understand what constitutes a crime and who the actual criminals are, and so they attack people for what they say and not deal with the people who have actually committed the crimes. I mean, I know it's so old-fashioned, but when I was at school, I generally took the view, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I didn't mind what I was called. What I objected to was somebody trying to beat me up.
Yeah, indeed. So, I think it's becoming quite blatant now, isn't it? I mean, it's not a sort of sneak thing. Somebody comes in and tucks something under their jumper and walks out. I mean, it's becoming absolutely blatant. People are walking in with a shoulder bag and just sweeping stuff off the shelves.
If you know that shoplifting or any other crime is consequence-free, then lots of people will do that. I mean, it's actually, you have to understand that people respond to incentives, including incentives to bad behavior. And if you make bad behavior consequence-free, people will behave badly.
Yeah. I mean, I think, people are stealing the high value items. This isn't some poor guy who's homeless and hungry and he comes in and, takes a sandwich and runs out again. I mean, people are coming in and nicking the high value items. They're taking the bottles of gin and the vodka and the steaks and this kind of thing, and then they're selling it down at the pub. There's even stories of them selling it to other shops, and they then put the stuff out again. And to me, it's a really worrying sign of just the further breakdown and sort of degradation of our society. And people seem to be, you're quite right, Tony, people seem to be getting away with it, don't they?
Unfortunately, yes. But it's not the shopkeeper's fault. And although I blame the people who commit the crimes, in a sense, the people who are responsible are our justice system, the Home Secretary, the police, and to a lesser extent, because one understands their problems, the shop owners, because they won't do anything about it.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Okay, let's move on. Okay, if the studio could put our next story up. This is all from, these are all recent newspaper themes and recent newspaper articles. Okay, thank you, studio. Okay, so Reeves vows her vow to workers as the economy returns to growth. Very optimistic headline there, I think, from the Daily Mirror. Rachel Reeves says she wants to get our economy firing on all cylinders, but has declined to be drawn on budget tax rises. How's the economy doing, Tony? What do you think?
Rachel from accounts, as I'm afraid I think of her, is somebody who believes in pie in the sky. Of course she wants the economy to grow. We all want the economy to grow. But economies only grow if you create the circumstances in which it can happen. if you make employing people more expensive by raising the cost of national insurance, by cutting thresholds, by raising the cost of employing people, you're going to find fewer people are employed. And that applies across the board. I mean, the Labour Party is driving wealth away from our country. We've all read the stories about millionaires departing. Now, I'm not saying that I have a great thing for millionaires, but millionaires are the people who invest. Millionaires are the people who pay the largest amount in taxes. And when you drive such people away, you ensure that the economy will stall. Now, a little thing a technical thing I have to raise at this point. I don't know whether you Tim, have come across the work of Professor Laffer, but Laffer,
the Laffer curve.
The Laffer curve. Now, what Laffer says basically is that if you tax people too highly, you remove the incentive to do the work to pay the taxes, and therefore raise taxes and get less in. And Reeves and the Labour Party, they're not merely have their head in the clouds, but they're actually pretty stupid, because they do not seem to have read Laffer, and they do not understand that in many cases, if you lower taxes, the state revenue increases. Because
there's proof of that. Yeah, there is.
And there are innumerable examples. Irish corporation tax. The Irish get in vast amounts in corporation tax by having the lowest rate in Europe. We have a massive amount of tobacco smuggling because tobacco costs less in Europe. So you simply buy it and then import it illegally. There are so many taxes where what you actually have to do is say, how can we get more in? We can do it by cutting the amount of tax.
You're quite right, Tony. And yes, I mean, more job protections means fewer jobs. Okay, so let's have a quick break, and we'll see what other great shows we've got coming up here on Unprecedented TV. Okay, good stuff. And welcome back to Tim Scott Uncancelled. Okay, studio, let's have the next story, the next theme to discuss. Let's rattle through these. Okay, this is a great one. Going back to our discussion earlier, Tony, peer pressure from Farage for the first Reform Lords. Nigel Farage has demanded that Sir Keir Starmer allow him to nominate Reform UK peers to the House of Lords for the first time. What do you reckon? Are you a fan of the Lords, or does it need a lot more reform?
I think we need a second chamber. I don't think the Lords is necessarily the best way of doing it. But whilst we have the Lords, reform is entitled to Lords in the same way as everybody else, reflecting their support. And, over 4 million votes and from a standing start at the last general election, and now leading in the polls and having massively won the last set of local elections. Reform is popular, and the number of peers you have is supposed to have some relationship to your popularity. We are very popular but have no peers at all.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think what Nigel is quite rightly referring to here is, if we look at the composition of the Lords, so there's 24 bishops, 210 Conservative peers, 210 Labour, 285 Conservative. There's 180 independent crossbenchers, 76 Lib Dems. They used to have about 100 peers, I think, even when they only had about a dozen MPs after the 2015 election. But the Greens have got a couple of peers, and Plaid Cymru have got a couple of peers. So, and the Unionist parties, the Northern Ireland Unionist parties, have got 9 or 10. So I don't think this is an unreasonable demand, although Keir Starmer's not going to give way on it, is he, Tony, realistically?
He's not going to give way, because the very popularity of reform is what he sees as the major threat. He knows that if there were an election tomorrow, he'd lose it massively and reform would win it. So the last thing he's going to do is make any concessions to reform, however much justice and honour and fairness should demand that he did. There is one member of the House of Lords of whom I'm a fan, and that is my former Brexit Party MEP colleague, Claire. Claire has a very interesting background.
Claire Fox.
Claire has a very interesting background, and she is one of the most genuinely open-minded, independent thinking people that I know. So if we're going to have a House of Lords, we need more reform peers in it, or some reform peers in it, but we also need more people of the caliber of Claire Fox.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And she does the Battle of Ideas Festival every October, which is well worth attending. Okay, let's have the next story, studio. Thank you. Okay, this is a cartoon from The Guardian. And there is Zelensky with Starmer on the steps of number 10 and a presser with a, GB News, I see. Bit of a pointed comment there, I think, from The Guardian. Wearing a stab vest, saying to Zelensky, President Zelensky, do you feel safe in such a dangerous city? Now, Tony, you live in London, don't you? I mean, what is it? Has London fallen? Is it a crime-ridden hellhole, or are such things just another vast right-wing conspiracy? What do you reckon?
Right, I reckon a couple of things. Firstly, London has become much more difficult to live in a whole number of ways. The 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is now widespread across London, makes driving anywhere in London, which always was a nightmare, even worse, particularly in the outer areas of London, where the roads aren't crowded in quite the same way that they are in the centre. And what Labour, what Khan seems to be doing, is doing everything he can to make living in London a nightmare. Now, what else is happening in London? Well, it's a drug law free zone. There are so many parts of London. To be fair, Brussels was the same when I was there. There are so many parts of London and Brussels where you walk down the street and what you smell is marijuana. And it's blatant. I think, actually, that considering how little they do to enforce the law, they might do better to consider legalizing it and then getting some tax revenue from it, as we do with alcohol. Because at the moment, we have the worst of all worlds. It remains criminal, but the law is not enforced. but we don't get any revenue from it because it's criminal rather than subject to an alcohol type system. The other thing I want to say is that time of day and where you are is massively important. If I walk down Chiswick High Street near where my flat is at midday, going to one of the many excellent restaurants in Chiswick for lunch, I feel totally safe. If I walk down the same street at 11 p.m. at night, I feel less safe. And there are other parts of London where, frankly, I simply wouldn't walk there probably at any time of day. So London's a big city. It's got millions of inhabitants, so somewhere around 8 million. So it depends which part of London you're in. But the quality of life in London has deteriorated massively.
I think it's deteriorated massively. Well, at least deteriorated across the whole country, Tony. And I recently just had to go from Marylebone to St Pancras, and it was a battle. Just the sheer numbers of people. It was an absolute battle. But I'll tell you what we're going to do now. We're going to go straight to our final. If we can go straight to our final item now. Now, before we play this, we'll play this in a minute. But before we play this is a story from America, and it's quite amusing, but also quite scary. But you will hear mention of a restaurant chain called Cracker Barrel. I should explain to viewers and listeners. You'll get the reference when you see it in a minute. Cracker Barrel, it's great actually. It's a chain of restaurants that serves sort of traditional Southern food, and there's a porch outside with with rocker chairs and all that sort of thing. So if the studio is ready, let's have this is a woman who she has a blog with over 1 million people, but you'll see what she has to say in a minute, and it's both funny and a bit worrying at the same time. So if we're ready, let's go ahead with that. If we can, studio, thank you.
White people that triple trumped, that have the nerve and the audacity to walk into a Mexican restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, an Indian restaurant, go to perhaps their gay hairdresser. I don't think you should be able to enjoy anything but Cracker Barrel. And if you want to triple trump and you want to browbeat DEI and you want to browbeat gay people and you want to browbeat black people, as you've been doing for 400 years, and you want to browbeat this generation of immigrants that come over here and open up businesses earnestly, pay their taxes, you want to demonize them and call them rapists and felons and all this shit, when the felon is the teeny weeny mushroom cock piece of shit, Kankles McTaco tits at the top of the ticket. I have fucking had it from top to bottom. White people that triple Trump should be banned, boycotted from enjoying the best thing that America has to offer, which is multiculturalism. Get your fat asses out of the Mexican restaurant, get your fat asses over to Cracker Barrel, because nobody wants to see your fucking smug ass, teeny weeny, pink arm, big gut around. Nobody wants to see that shit. No one.
Hilarious.
That was. We do apologise for the language there, by the way. That is not the sort of language we'd endorse. But if you'd taken all the bad language out, there wouldn't have been much left. That was Jennifer Welch, actress and sort of activist. And I think we might, if the studio's got it, we might have another clip as well from the Gutfeld show on Fox News, which adds a sort of an amusing take on it. And again, apologies about the language on this clip as well. I mean, it's, I do find that a bit worrying, Tony.
I actually want to kick off with how ignorant she is. First of all, she doesn't know, but back in the 1860s, it was a Republican president, Lincoln, who fought the Civil War and freed the slaves, and it was the Democrats who were the party of the slave owners. Now, not a lot of people know that, but the Republicans were the party that freed the slaves and ended slavery in the United States. Secondly, a lot of people, Mexicans, people of various different heritages who are legally in the States, they voted for Trump. Trump's vote was not all white. There were lots of people of color, lots of Mexicans, every sort of group that you can think of had Trump supporters, often in very large numbers. And although I'd have to check this, I believe I'm right in saying that he could not have become the president without a combination of the Mexican vote for him and the black vote for him.
Yes, Trump, for a Republican, we should qualify it there. For a Republican, Trump actually had quite a multicultural, multiracial vote, particularly among Hispanic men and among black men. Okay, so the next clip is ready. This is from the Fox News show Gutfeld. It gives a bit of an amusing take on that outburst from Jennifer Welch. Again, we do apologize for the language. Okay, so we seem to be having a bit of trouble getting.
God, I don't know. It's like you know what, Tyrus? I just realized we needed new assholes. We were like, we went through all of our assholes, and then God gives us this one. Here, Greg.
I gotta be real with you. When I first saw this, all I was thinking was, Mom. My mom. This is an easy explanation.
Yeah.
See, she thinks, first of all, reality TV star. That's like someone putting porn star on their business card and being serious.
Yeah.
She was obviously miscast. She should never have been on a reality TV. She should have been on Botched.
Yeah. What's that?
But here's the cold part. She did that nose on purpose, just putting that out there. What happened is she got to the Mexican restaurant and there was a wait.
Yeah.
And she had to wait for her table. And the people in front of her, look at they're fat naggers. That's why you sat them. No, bitch, because there's no reservations at a Mexican restaurant. And that's exactly what it is. That was that elitist thing. She had to wait 15 to 20 minutes. And then they asked her for her phone number because they call her when her table is ready. And she threw a complete fit.
Yes.
That's exactly what this is. She's not a star. She's not anybody you want to do this story over again. And I'll have you know, as a black man, I think Cracker Barrel is delicious. I think they have. If you want a fluffy ass pancake on a Wednesday afternoon after a rough night of Tuesday drinking, take your ass to Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, I can say from personal experience, Cracker Barrel's really good, actually. They do all-day breakfast and all-day pancakes, so, you know, what's not to like. Okay, so we're going to close the show up. Tony, let's leave you with a last comment, then I'll close the show. Anything you want to say about what we've just seen?
I can't resist saying that Cracker Barrel to me is a defunct cheese brand. You won't remember it, but there used to be Cracker Barrel cheese. I'm sure my parents bought it. So mention Cracker Barrel to me, and I'm not in an American restaurant. I'm in a supermarket looking at cheese. But I thought the whole thing was hilarious. And frankly, attacks and people like that silly woman, they do themselves no good. They don't win friends. And as I pointed out, she's also very ignorant.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, and again, folks, we do apologise for the language, but you know, we either I think if we'd taken all the bad language out, we wouldn't have had much to show. But okay, so we're now getting towards the end of the show. And Tony Brown, former Nigel Farage advisor, Conservative parliamentary candidate, editor of the Free Nation for the Freedom Association. Great to have you on the show, Tony, and really appreciate you joining us. Our thanks to the studio. And we hope you've enjoyed the show today. Thank you for joining us, whoever you are, wherever you are, and however you've watched. So my thanks again. Tim Scott signing off. Until next time, from Tim Scott, Uncancelled. Thanks, everyone.